السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، نحمده ونسبحه ونقدسه على آلائه ونعمائه، ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، إلها واحدا أحدا فردا صمدا حيا قيوما، نؤمن له بالربوبية ونقر له بالعبودية، من يهد الله فهو المهتدي ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا، ونشهد أن سيدنا محمدا عبده ورسوله أرسله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله. اللهم صل وسلم وزد وبارك وترحم على محمد وآل محمد كما صليت وسلمت وباركت وترحمت على إبراهيم وآل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. وصل اللهم وسلم على أوصيائه وخلفائه وعترته وأهل بيته. عباد الله، أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله عز وجل. قال الله في كتابه الحكيم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم: ولتجدن أقربهم مودة للذين آمنوا الذين قالوا إنا نصارى ذلك بأن منهم قسيسين ورهبانا وأنهم لا يستكبرون. صدق الله العلي العظيم. وصلوا على محمد وآل محمد. If you were to inform the common layman today, Muslim or Christian, that had it not been for the support of early Christians, the message of Islam would have been at risk of extinction and eradication. This is a fact in early Islamic history which took place, which we today do not hide. Rather, we are proud of this fact. It is the fact that early Muslims, out of fear for their life and out of fear for their property and their well-being, they were commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a few Muslims, to migrate from the city of Mecca, which was at the time overrun by pagan Arabs, to Abyssinia, present-day Ethiopia, where a good Christian king provided them with refuge. And this is why the early Christians in the Quran are praised. In chapter number 5, verse 82, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about them, وَلَتَجِدَنَّ أَقْرَبَهُمْ مَوَدَّةً لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. You will find the closest in friendship and amity to the believers, meaning to the Muslims, الَّذِينَ قَالُوا إِنَّا نَصَارَى. Those who say we are Christians. Those who say we are Christians are closest to the believers. ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّ مِنْهُمْ قِسِّيسِينَ وَرُهْبَانًا وَأَنَّهُمْ لَا يَسْتَكْبِرُونَ. That is because among them are monks, priests, people who are scholarly, people who are knowledgeable. وَأَنَّهُمْ لَا يَسْتَكْبِرُونَ. They are not bigoted when it comes to the message of Islam. Certainly the king welcomed the message of Islam with open arms, the Ethiopian king who gave the Muslims refuge. Now this represents a very crucial point in Muslim-Christian relations. And it wasn't the first instance where Christians came to the aid of Muslims. It wasn't the first and it wouldn't be the last. This affinity, this friendship was naturally reciprocated by later Muslims in the form of covenants, pacts, peace treaties between Muslim leaders and their Christian subjects. Now, a very little known fact is that throughout the history of Islam, there have been covenants and pacts which were initiated by Muslim leaders, by the Prophet, beginning with the Prophet himself and then the leaders which came after him. And these pacts were written to Christian subjects whom they came in contact with. And these covenants protected their rights of property, of life, of religion, of intellect, of progeny. And these pacts came to be known as the covenants of the Prophet Muhammad with the Christians of the world. There's an entire book which was published last year by a Canadian Muslim scholar named The Covenants of the Prophet Muhammad with the Christians of the world. These documents, which were initiated by the Prophet and by the leaders who came after him, have been reprinted and in their original form and translated as well and commentated on. One of the most interesting of these covenants is the covenant of Imam Ali alayhi salam with the Armenian Christians of Jerusalem. During the advent of Islam, it is said that the head of the Armenian church in Jerusalem came to the Prophet, and although during the time of the Prophet, Islam had not reached Jerusalem, it didn't reach Jerusalem until the time of the second Khalifa. But this man, Abraham, the patriarch of the Armenian Church of Jerusalem, came to the Prophet seeking a covenant which would protect the rights of Christians in Jerusalem under the influence of the new religion of Islam. So the Prophet Muhammad provided him with a covenant. That covenant today is lost. However, we know of its existence from outside history sources. There are two covenants which were written later to specifically the Armenian Christians of Jerusalem. One today is known as the Firman of Umar ibn al-Khattab. It was written during the time of the second Khalifa, which is when the Muslims conquered Jerusalem. And then another one was written during the time of Imam Ali. Now, let's look at the covenant of Imam Ali with the Armenian Christians of Jerusalem because it's a little bit more expansive and a little bit more detailed, and it's relevant to Muslim-Christian relations that we see today. One of the first sentences, or one of the first clauses which Imam Ali alayhi salam writes to these Christians, the Armenian Christians, and this was written during the last year of his Khilafah. It was written during the year 40 after Hijrah, and Imam Ali alayhi salam was assassinated in the same year. And if you know anything about Islamic history, you know that there was a lot going on at that time. A lot of internal strife, a lot of turmoil. So Imam Ali alayhi salam speaks about that in this covenant. One of the first clauses that we find in this sentence, in this covenant, Imam Ali alayhi salam says the following. Before he speaks about the rights of the Armenian Christians, before he speaks about their responsibilities, he is introducing the pact, the idea of the covenant. Why I am writing this covenant, for what reason? Number one, he says that so that Islam will prevail, Christianity shall continue. So he's reassuring them that as long as Islam exists, Christianity is going to continue. Meaning what? Meaning that Islam does not seek the eradication of Christianity or any other religion for that matter. And if you look at history, people will tell you, well, Islam was spread by the sword. Islam was not spread by the sword. What was spread by the sword was the political domain of Islam. Meaning that there were Christian subjects who lived under Islamic governments for not only decades but centuries. If you look at Islamic history today, and if you look at the Islamic conquests, the places which were conquered by the Muslims in the early days of Islam. When you look at Iraq, the Levant area, which is Asham, which today comprises of Syria and parts of Lebanon and Palestine and Jordan, Egypt, some parts of Iran, Armenia, Central Asia, there were majority Christian populations living in these areas. And if you look at history, you will find that these areas remained Christian for decades and for centuries. Meaning that when the Muslims arrived, they didn't force people to convert to Islam. Of course, this is besides a few isolated incidents. There were isolated incidents where sometimes populations were forced to accept Islam. But if you look at it in this way, that there is no single parallel if you compare to other religions. If you look at how Charlemagne, for instance, forced the German tribes to accept Christianity, there's no single parallel to that in Islam. So Islam does not seek the destruction of Christianity. Imam Ali alayhi salam says that so long as Islam will prevail, Christianity shall continue. And even when you look at the idea of Islamic and Christian eschatology, the belief in the end of times, we find that towards the end of time, where the earth will be filled with injustice, there will be a savior, a Masih. Who is that Masih? Isa ibn Maryam. The term Masih, Messiah, even in Islam, is reserved for Jesus. Imam Mahdi alayhi salam, Ajjalallah ta'ala farajahu sharif, will also accompany the Prophet Isa, Jesus. May the peace and blessings of God be upon him in this mission. He will lead him into this mission. So it is important that there are devout followers of Christ, of Jesus Christ, and there are devout followers of Islam in order to achieve the goal which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has desired for us. This is one sentence. This is one clause. In another clause, Imam Ali alayhi salam says that violating this covenant is a transgression of divine ordinance. So the Imam here is saying that this covenant that I am writing with these Christians, violating it is a transgression of divine ordinance, meaning that this comes from Allah. It's not a covenant which Imam Ali alayhi salam is writing for personal benefit. It's not out of diplomacy. It's not out of taqiyya, out of fear. Here he is saying that this is the will of God. The will of God is that we make peace between us and yourselves. In another clause he says, there shall be perpetual peace between Muslims and Christians. For as long as we live side by side, there shall be perpetual. Perpetual meaning that it is not discontinued, it shall be continued. In another part he says, all of this is true as long as Armenians shall take no part in opposing my government. As long as they remain loyal, they don't have to convert to Islam. But as long as they do not fight against the Muslims, then they shall be protected. Here, loyalty is not necessarily to a brother. Loyalty is not necessarily to a tribe. Loyalty is not necessarily even to religion. Sometimes you will find people of your own tribe or your own brother, or sometimes within your own faith, they are more disloyal to you than what we consider a disbeliever, a Christian or a Jew who is loyal to you and who has your back and who looks after your interests. And this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, He says that you will not find those who believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and believe in the hereafter, meaning those people who have solid faith, the Muslims who have solid faith. You will not find them loving those who fight against God, even if they are their brethren, even if they are their fathers, even if they are their sons, even if they are people from their own tribe. So the Imam is saying that as long as they do not fight against us on account of our religion, we will protect them. And this is what the Quran says. Again, the Quran says that Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, La yanhaakum Allah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not forbid you. La yanhaakum Allahu anil ladina lam yuqatilukum fid din wa lam yukhrijukum min diyarikum an tawadduhum wa tuqsitu ilayhim. Inna Allah yuhibbul muqsitin. An tabarruhum wa tuqsitu ilayhim. Inna Allah yuhibbul muqsitin. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not prevent people, does not prevent the believers from loving or being close to the Christians, people of other faith, as long as they do not fight against you on account of your own religion. So here Imam Ali alayhi salam is talking about some of, or why it's important for him to enact this covenant. And then he makes a point which we will come back to. He says, thus my covenant, this covenant that you see, thus my covenant is a burden and an obligation to its recipients. Meaning that people who are loyal subjects of my government, it is a burden on their shoulders and it is an obligation for them to abide by these rules. And the following, and wearisome and irksome to maliciously disposed and evil-minded persons. This sentence is key. Imam Ali alayhi salam here is saying that there are people who are malicious, people who are evil-minded, and for them it will be hard to uphold this covenant. They will see Christians and they would not want to be just towards them. They will see people of other faiths, they will see people who are minorities, and they won't want to be just towards them. Remember, Imam Ali alayhi salam is writing this at a time of civil conflict. There's strife and there is turmoil. At that time, there were people who, because it was enacted by Ali ibn Abi Talib, it was their goal to cause strife. It was their goal to cause chaos. The Imam himself and the Imams that came after him, they said that there are people who will take our words, they will write down our words when they hear them, and then they will twist our words. They will warp them and they will disseminate it amongst the people. Why? Not because it's falsehood, everything that we say is truth, but because it comes from the Imams of Ahlul Bayt. Because it was for the mere policy that it was the covenant of Imam Ali. Had it been the covenant of another Khalifa, you would find no opposition. If you look at the earlier covenants, they don't speak about opposition. Imam Ali alayhi salam says that there will be people who will come after me, and although I am granting Christians who are a minority under my government, although I am granting them security, although I am giving them the privilege and the right, more than a privilege, but a right to practice their own religion, there will be people who, because it comes from me, they want to negate it. They want to spread terror. They want to spread chaos. And this is something that our own Prophet prophesied. This is something that he told Amir al-Mu'mineen. He told him, Ya Ali, there will be 3 groups of people who will oppose you. Al-Nakithina, wal-Qasitina, wal-Mariqeen. And in reality, there were 3 battles which were fought against Amir al-Mu'mineen. The 3 civil wars of Islam, the first civil wars of Islam. Jamal, Siffin, and Nahrawan. The Prophet told Amir al-Mu'mineen that you will fight these people. These people, some of them are troublemakers. They will fight you not for a good reason. They will fight you just because of your name, just because of your relationship to me, just because of what greatness they saw in you. People such as Muawiyah and his turncoat followers, people such as the Khawarij, the rejectionists, they would spread terror and chaos and fear among the population merely because of their loyalty to Amir al-Mu'mineen. That's it. For instance, you find that Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, he sent one time his enforcer, Busr ibn Artat, he sent him to Yemen. At that time, the governor of Yemen was Ubaidullah ibn Abbas, who was the cousin of Amir al-Mu'mineen, a loyal cousin and family member. When Busr ibn Artat came to the home of Ubaidullah ibn Abbas, he found that Ubaidullah was not there. Who was there? His wife and his 2 children. And in a cruel, animalistic, gruesome act, he took both children, because they were the cousins and representatives of Amir al-Mu'mineen, and he beheaded them in front of their mother. You find the Khawarij, those who also fought against Amir al-Mu'mineen. One day, when they went to establish their base in Nahrawan, where Amir al-Mu'mineen eventually fought them, they come to Nahrawan and they find the governor is also a representative of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Abdullah ibn al-Arat. And so what do? They grab the man, they question him about his loyalty. He responds that his loyalty belongs to Amir al-Mu'mineen. So they take him, they round him up, they take his pregnant wife. They disembowel his wife in front of him. They take out the child, they run the sword through the child, through the infant. They execute his wife and then they execute him. Why? Because his loyalty belonged to Amir al-Mu'mineen. When Imam Ali alayhi salam is enacting this covenant, he is saying that these people who are defenseless, these Armenian Christians living in Jerusalem, they are defenseless. there will be people who will come after me who will fight against them not only because of their religion, it has nothing to do with the fact that they are Christian, but because I am giving them peace. I am the one to provide for them security, and they want to shake that. We'll come back to this, inshallah. What does it mean as far as today? Now, Imam Ali alayhi salam, towards the end of this covenant, he begins to stipulate a series of conditions. So what does this covenant say? What are the laws? What are the regulations? He says the following. He says, the scale of taxation which we have placed should not be altered. He warns against molestation and oppression. He says that the monks and the priests shall not be converted from Christianity to Islam. The Christians shall continue to pray in their churches. No symbols of Christianity shall be altered or destroyed. The bells should not be removed from their churches. Their people should not be disturbed or molested or oppressed. Their land belongs to them, their churches belong to them, their homes belong to them, and their lives are honored. And then towards the end of the covenant, Imam Ali alayhi salam again, he says, treat them with tenderness and kindness. And tenderness and kindness is at the heart of Islam. Allah tells the Prophet, وَبِرَحْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ لِنْتَ لَهُمْ وَلَوْ كُنْتَ فَضًّا غَلِيظَ الْقَلْبِ لَنْفَضُّوا مِنْ حَوْلِكَ. That it is out of the mercy of Allah that you were gentle and you were tender with them. And had you been hard-hearted, had you been arrogant, had you been stuck up, had you turned away from them, they would have abandoned you a very long time ago. So tenderness and kindness with people of all faiths is at the heart of Islam. Imam Ali alayhi salam is reiterating this fact in this covenant. And then in the end he says, if anyone should infringe the contents of this covenant, he is an unbeliever and apostate from the divine prophet. Again, he is reiterating the seriousness of the matter. So now we have this covenant, which is written by Imam Ali alayhi salam. And he hands to the patriarch of the Armenian Christian church in Jerusalem. Throughout the covenant, he says that this covenant shall be binding as long as this universe exists. And if anyone was to oppress these Armenian Christians, all you would have to do is present this covenant to the ruler, and that would suffice your protection. It would guarantee your rights. Now, this wasn't the last covenant to be written with the Christians. Certainly not the Armenian Christians of Jerusalem. There were many which came later. However, when you dissect the covenants word for word, sentence by sentence, you come to realize the message of Islam, a message of harmony, a message of peace, and a message of security. Now today, Islam, or the image of Islam, is overshadowed by images of purported terror, Islamic terror against minorities, especially Christian minorities. It is overshadowed by violence and misogyny. Rarely do you find covenants like these being presented to the public. A Christian scholar once commentated on one of these pacts which were written. He says the following, and I will quote him word for word. And this is the quote of Alphonse Mingana, who was an Assyrian Iraqi Christian scholar. He says the following. When he read about the Charter of Protection, which the Khalifa al-Muqtafi wrote to the Nestorian Christians of Baghdad, which is similar along the lines of the covenant of Imam Ali to the Armenian Christians of Jerusalem, he says the following. He says, however imperfect Islam may have been in some social aspects, statutory intolerance was not one of them. The charter, this charter, emanates from the chancery of an Abbasid caliph. But could an English king, a Dutch queen, or a French president write in the 20th century a more tolerant charter in favor of their numerous Muslim subjects? It's yet to be seen. Now, what does this mean today? Imam Ali alayhi salam is saying that there will be people who, because I have written it, had someone else written this covenant, they would respect it. Had I have written it, because I have written it, you will find that they will turn against me. Today, the very same people who the Prophet warned Imam Ali alayhi salam, their descendants, today they are wreaking havoc against mainly Christian minorities. When you go to Iraq, and Syria and these areas which they are wreaking havoc in, their target is not only other Muslims, but they go to Christian minorities. And you can read today on the news what they have done in terms of targeting Christian minorities. When they entered the city of Mosul this past June, when they entered, the first Sunday which came after that was the first Sunday in Mosul after 1600 years where the church bells did not go off. There were no more services. They were given the choice, either accept Islam or it is the sword. They were made to pay a tax which most people under regular circumstances cannot afford. When they were leaving, they were harassed, they were molested, they were oppressed. The money which was in their pockets, the jewelry which was on their bodies was stripped away from them. Is this what Islam tells us when it comes to dealing with Christians? It is these very same people who wreaked havoc against Christian communities, who Imam Ali alayhi salam warned of. It is their descendants today who are wreaking havoc against Christian minorities in Iraq and in Syria. The heart of this message is coexistence between Muslims and Christians, whether Muslims are a majority or whether they are a minority. See, here when Imam Ali writes this covenant, Muslims are a minority. Muslims are a minority, but the control is in their hand. There's no taqiyya, there's no fear. By that time, the Muslims were a solid military force. They weren't afraid of rebellion, they weren't afraid of revolt. It's not out of diplomacy, it's not out of political friendship or business friendship that Imam Ali grants security to the Christians. And his idea and what he says is that this covenant, this pact of protection, is an ordinance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so long as Islam will prevail. Whether Muslims are a minority or whether they are a majority, Christianity shall also continue. And this, I believe, and this is only one example of the covenants, the Islamic covenants towards the Christians of the world, which today, of course, is overshadowed and it's overlooked because people would prefer sensationalism. They prefer images of violence and misogyny over images of peace and coexistence and harmony. One example, and I'll end with this, is the recent Ziyarat Arba'in, where millions of people from across the world marched peacefully to the shrine, the Qibla of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. You barely hear any coverage in mainstream media. Why? Because people who are marching for a peaceful cause and for a harmonious cause, it doesn't bring in money. It's not beneficial to the weapons factories. It's not beneficial to the military. It doesn't bring in any interest. So there's no interest in it. These are truly considered a treasure chest, a gem in Muslim-Christian relations. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to be among those who uphold the covenants of the Prophet. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to be among those who are the pioneers of peaceful and harmonious coexistence and understanding. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wal asri inna al-insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa amilu as-salihat wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr wa sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين نحمده ونسبحه ونقدسه على آلائه ونعمائه ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا محمدا عبده ورسوله أرسله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله اللهم صل وسلم وزد وبارك وترحم على محمد وآل محمد كما صليت وسلمت وباركت وترحمت على إبراهيم وآل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد وصل اللهم وسلم على أوصيائه وخلفائه علي أمير المؤمنين وقائد الغر المحجلين وعلى البضعة الطاهرة فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين وعلى سبطي نبي الرحمة وسيدي شباب أهل الجنة الحسن والحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والخلف الهادي المهدي عجل الله تعالى فرجه وسهل مخرجه وجعلنا من أنصاره وأعوانه. عباد الله، أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله عز وجل. My brothers and sisters, since our friends and our neighbors and our co-workers are all in the Christmas holiday spirit, I thought it would be refreshing to share some of the wisdoms of the Prophet Jesus from Islamic literature. And there are a few beautiful hadith which I'd like to share with you. The reason I've picked these hadith is because usually, especially in the United States of America, for the most part, and this isn't a general statement, but living in the United States of America, Christian majority country, you find that unfortunately the celebration of the life of Jesus Christ has been overshadowed with materialism and consumerism. And this is very ironic. I mean, had it been, for instance, celebrating the birth of the Prophet Dawood or Sulaiman, who were kings maybe, this would be relevant. But when it comes to the Prophet Jesus, Isa alayhi salam, it's very ironic because he was the most humble, he was the most unmaterialistic of the prophets. And just to share with you some of his wisdoms concerning this world and what he had to say about this world. There's one hadith, one narration that says the following, that a man accompanied Jesus, saying to him, I want to be with you, I want to be your companion. So Jesus accepted him. They set forth and they reached the bank of a river where they sat down to eat. And when they sat down to eat, they had 3 loaves of bread. So they shared these loaves. Jesus had 1 loaf of bread, his guest had 1 loaf of bread, and they left 1 loaf of bread untouched. So Jesus gets up and he goes to the bank of the river in order to drink some water. When he comes back, the 3rd loaf isn't there. So he turns to the man. He tells him, who took the loaf? The man says, I don't know. So Jesus does not reply. Jesus set forth once more with the man, and he saw a doe with 2 of her young. He saw a female, what do they call the ghazala? A deer, thank you. He saw a female deer with 2 of her young. So he called one of them. One of them came to him. He slaughtered it, he prepared it as a meal, and they both enjoyed the meal. He roasted it and they both enjoyed it as a meal. After they were done, Jesus turns to this young animal, which they have roasted, and he tells it to get up. And by the grace of Allah, with the permission of Allah, it is resurrected back to life. Once it's resurrected back to life, he turns to the man. He told him, now answer me. Who took the 3rd loaf of bread? Jesus is trying to tell him, Baba, I'm not an ordinary man. I mean, you saw the miracle in front of you by the permission of God. Why are you hiding a small secret from me? So the man says, I don't know who took it. Then the 2 of them came to a body of water in a valley. Jesus took the man by the hand and they walked across the water, on top of the water, as was the miracle of Jesus. And then he said to him, I ask you in the name of him who showed you this miracle, who took the loaf? The man replied, he said, I don't know. Then they came to a waterless desert and they sat down upon the ground. Jesus began to gather some earth and sand and then said, turn to gold by God's leave, by God's permission. So he took some of the dirt in his hand and he ordered it to turn into gold. And it turned into gold. Once it turned into gold, it turned to 3 pieces of gold. He turned to the man and he said, I ask you by the one who created this miracle, who took the 3rd loaf of bread? The man says, I don't know. So he tells him the following. He tells him that there are 3 pieces of gold. Let's split the gold between me and you. We'll split the pieces of gold on the basis of whoever ate more loaves of bread. So if you ate 1 loaf of bread, you will receive 1 piece of gold. So now this man, he realized that there is material benefit. So he says, yes, it was me. I ate the 3rd loaf. So what does Jesus do? Jesus tells him, take all three. I don't want this. This is for you. So the man takes the gold. Two men come upon this man. Jesus leaves him. He says, هَذَا فِرَاقٌ بَيْنِي وَبَيْنَكَ. This is where we part. I have no relationship with you anymore. So two men come upon him in the desert with the gold, and they wanted to rob and kill him. He said to them, he says this, he has a proposal. Let us divide it into 3 portions among us, and send one of you to town to buy us some food to eat. So when one of them was sent off, he said to himself, the guy that's going to get the food, why should I divide the gold with those two? Rather, I shall poison the food and have the gold to myself. I'll come and serve it to them. They'll die. I'll take all the gold for myself. So he went off and he did so. He comes back. Meanwhile, the two who stayed behind said to each other, they're planning as well, we should give him 1/3 of the gold. Instead, let's kill him and we'll take all the gold for ourselves. When he returned, they killed him. Now he's dead. Now they're hungry, you know, robbers, it's very tedious. It's a very tiring job robbing people. So they said, instead of leaving, let's have this feast. So they begin to eat and they die because of the poison. So all 3 of them now are dead over a few pieces of gold. The gold remained in the desert with the 3 men dead beside it. Jesus passed by with his companions. He found them in this condition and he said to his companions, this is the world, beware of it. Very simple. If you're going after gold, if gold is your goal, if that's all you want, then you might enjoy it sometimes, but most of the time you're probably not going to enjoy it. So to compare this with the idea of consumerism that we have today, I'll just share 2 very brief hadith as well from Jesus. In one he says, he who seeks worldly things is like the man who drinks seawater. The more he drinks, the more thirsty he becomes until it kills him. Because seawater is salty and salt creates more thirst. And once he creates more thirst, he's going to keep drinking until his blood pressure goes up because of the sodium and his heart is going to explode. He's going to keep asking for it until eventually it's going to kill him. In one more hadith he says, Jesus said, he says this to his disciples, you will not gain God's bounty until you wear coarse wool, which in Arabic we refer to as suf. And this is where the name of the Sufi tradition comes from. Wearing coarse wool as a sign of humility, as a sign of asceticism. You know, the kind of wool which itches you from the inside. You will not gain God's bounty until you wear coarse wool with joy. This is the condition. Eat barley, which is a very basic food, with joy. And make the ground your bed with joy. This doesn't mean that if you have a sleep number bed and you're driving a Mercedes-Benz that you have to sleep on the floor or ride a donkey instead of drive a car. But until you are satisfied with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the little that He has given you, you will not receive God's bounty. You can enjoy this life. If you have the money, if you have the wealth, you can drive a nice car. There's nothing wrong with that. You can live in a big house. This is all هَذَا مِن فَضْلِ رَبِّي. This is all from the provisions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provides. But in order to truly benefit from the bounties of Allah, you have to be willing to be satisfied, joyful with the very little that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us. It's refreshing to remind ourselves of the tradition of the humility and the asceticism of the Prophet Isa alayhi salam in a time where, unfortunately, the celebration of the life of Christ is overwhelmed by consumerism and by materialism. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to be among those who truly walk in the example of Isa ibn Maryam. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Inna Allah ya'muru bil-'adli wal-ihsani wa ita'i dhil qurba wa yanha 'anil fahsha'i wal-munkar wal-baghi ya'idhukum la'allakum tadhakkarun. Aqulu qawli hadha wa astaghfirullaha li wa lakum. Qumu ila salatikum yarhamukum Allah.